Welcome, everyone, to the Men's ADHD Support Group. We are gathered here together today to have a conversation about making friends and what that means. Because a lot of us, when we get out of the structure of school and college, we go to try to connect with all of our people, but maybe we've moved away, or maybe we're in a new place, or maybe we've joined the military, or maybe we were just on our normal sabbaticals bouncing from place to place. We lose track of our people. And then we find ourselves in new places and no friends and no way to connect. And so, what we're going to talk about today is how do we connect when we've lost a lot of that and we need to gain more? Because, as many of us have learned about the Men's ADHD Support Group, one of the reasons why we exist is to provide community and support and to be there when you don't have the people in your lives. So, to that end, we brought on, well, a friendship expert. Carolyn McGuire is author of an absolutely amazing book called Why Will No One Play With Me? And she's won a lot of awards around this kind of work. And so I wanted to bring her on. The team really was looking forward to this. We've kind of been fangirling in the background, which has been awesome. Carolyn, welcome to the Men's ADHD Support Group.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. I've always heard about this group from my friend Brendan Mahan. I am really excited to be here. In addition to Why Will No One Play With Me, I'm working on my second book right now, which is going to be for adults and will come out next April. And so, in very ADHD fashion, I have spent the past 3 or 4 years thinking exclusively about adult friendships. How do we make friends? Why is it so hard to make friends? Because it's not just hard for us, it's also hard for even typical people are out there talking about how hard it is to make friends as an adult. I've always worked with not only kids and teens, but also adult clients because starting with the Hollowell Center many, many years ago when I started coaching, there was just such a need for adults trying to figure out friendship, trying to figure out social skills. And I think that when Shane approached me about this group, I was really excited because I think that it's also difficult for men to make friends. I think it's difficult for us to talk about these things. If you know my work, I am all about very practical, easy to use solutions. So I'm going to share my screen and talk about this sort of path to friendship and what I think we can do. And then after, when we have Q&A, feel free to be like, hey, I want to go back to this slide. I want to go back to this point. I want to ask you questions about it. I always tell people I do not claim to have perfect social skills or to be the best at everything like this. I am just the person who thinks about it all the time and reads the research and goes deep into this. I was definitely not a kid who had a lot of friends. I was very much bullied, very much someone who wasn't embraced by other people. But I figured out how to make friends. And then when I started to be an ADHD coach, I just felt like it was the piece of ADHD life that was really missing and that no one talked about. That we were lonely, that we struggle with friendship, and that we struggle with the skills to make friends. And so I will share my screen and get into it and share what I have learned and some things that I have found really work for my clients and for other people. So I want to start by saying that we friend differently. People with ADHD, we have different neurology. We don't necessarily friend the way everyone else friends. And I think that that's really important. And I don't think we should try to become other people. I think we should try to make friends as ourselves, our authentic selves. We want to belong, and friendship can be a salve against not only loneliness, but also other things. They help us, they lift us up. And we also have these great ADHD strengths. And I think that those are an important ingredient as we make friends. I think it's so easy to focus on the negatives, but I really want us to focus on what's good about us and the things that we do really well. Interest and boredom are an absolute essential piece to talk about here. We get bored very easily. we are not always interested in everything, and interest is our fuel. And so, if we want to pay attention, if we want to make friends, if we want to be engaged with people, I think it's really important to think about what interests us and what will hold our interest. Dr. Thomas Brown did a ton of research on situational variability and the impact of environment on us. And that's the other piece here. I think that we have to curate our friendships, curate the way we do friendships. And I'm going to put this idea out there that's a little bit revolutionary, which is that we get to make choices. So we get to choose who we're friends with. We get to choose whether people treat us well and whether we want to be friends with them. And in everything we do, we make a choice. So I know masking is a topic that Shane had in some of the promotional literature. And I just want to say that the idea of pretending, camouflaging, trying to be someone else is not what I'm about. I'm about you being your authentic self. Does that mean we don't adapt? We do. We adapt. We have to sometimes do things in a different way. We have to say things in a way that doesn't hurt people's feelings. But I think one of the big things is that we get to make a choice. Sometimes you read the room even, and then you say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say this anyway, right? So all of this is really about a method that allows us to make friends as our authentic self. I don't want us to make friends as sort of a shadow of ourselves. I think that one of the important things we have to start with is that there are different levels of friendship. I call this the flavors of friendship. Like ice cream, there's different flavors. And there are different friends for different phases of your life. And there are different friends for different purposes. One of the things that I think happens within the ADHD world is that people assign the characteristics of friendship to someone who is a buddy or an acquaintance or an emerging friend. And then we feel hurt and distraught when that person doesn't reciprocate to us in the way a real friend would. And so, one of the things I always start with is this idea of the levels of friendship. Trust is track record, trust is your history with someone. And we build our level of trust and closeness with people over time. And I'm going to talk about how we do that and how we like build these friendships. But I think it's really, really important as we start out to say, like, there are different levels of friendships, and it's okay to have an activity friend. It's okay to have someone who is an emerging friend. It's okay to have someone who is just going to be an acquaintance. I think often because we're lonely and because we've had a hard time, we kind of eschew any acquaintances or buddies and feel sort of like, oh, I have enough acquaintances. And some of that is because we don't love superficial small talk and stuff like that. But if you think about friendship as an ecosystem, everybody you meet feeds your life and contributes to your life. And if someone is a buddy today, that doesn't mean they can't become an emerging friend and turn into a friend. You know, you could decide that you are looking for really close friends, or you could decide you're looking for someone who shares your interest and who's going to be a friend for a particular activity. The person you go hunting with, the person that you ride motorcycles with, the person you do Dungeons and Dragons with, whatever it is, that could also be part of your friendship goals. So, one of the things I would say to you is it's really important as we're out there trying to make new friends to start by thinking about what are your friendship goals? Like, what do you want out of this? Life can still surprise you. You might still meet someone and really they contribute to your life and they're not what you expected. But there's also a degree to which we want to think about what is it I want? So, this is my formula for friendship, and I'm going to get into this in more depth. The idea here is that there are certain elements we have to have in place in order to make friends. One is participation. So, I love my couch and I'm very comfortable there, but friends aren't coming to my couch. So, I have to participate in different activities. I have to be with people. I have to have shared experiences with them. Part of how we make friends, think about the last friend you made or someone you were friends with over your lifetime. You have shared experiences with them, whether that's you went to elementary school together and you share that common language and that common background, you worked with them, or you actually meet them in an activity or in this men's support group, and that's how you become friends. You connect with people regularly and you build trust, you bond, and then eventually you meet outside that one activity environment and you bridge into a deeper friendship. So that's why I talk about these stages of friendships or these different levels of friendships, because you could be connecting with someone regularly and enjoying them, but only within that activity. And part of becoming better friends is actually bridging to outside the activity. Now, I included this quote because I had a moment the other day where someone quoted Star Wars to me, and I had an instant click with them. And part of why I use the formula I use is because it involves high interest. And when someone turns to you and says, these are not the droids we are looking for, you are looking for, I know that they are my people and that they understand me. And I feel an instant click. I do this lab where every month I go in to someone's membership and I help the adults with friendship. And one of the adults told a story. I had been badgering them all to join different things, as I'm going to share with you tonight. And one of the adults said that they joined something and that they've had a really hard time making conversation with people. But when they joined this activity, and it involved birds, it was a bird related activity, they clicked with someone so instantly. All of the small talk, all of the barriers, all of the what are we going to talk about next, all of the stilted conversation faded away. And suddenly they had that click and they were able to spend the day together, talk, and then make plans for the future. A ton of why I base a lot of what I'm doing on interest and on this idea of meeting your people and finding that click is because when you do have that click, when someone quotes to you something that you love, it is so much easier to go through that formula for friendship and to bond and to have those shared experiences. So I added this tonight to the deck because I wanted to speak to it. So my formula is really about high interest activities that allow for high connection and high engagement. So, for instance, in that membership that I go into, someone joined a choir. Awesome. Except they only had 7 minutes within the activity to actually talk to people and meet people, which wasn't enough time, which meant that everything was so super superficial and they weren't able to really connect and bond. So I'm going to share with you activities that are high interest, high connection, and that have time for you to get to know someone. And you probably will need to join more than just one activity. But the idea here is that you have high engagement, high opportunities to connect within these activities, and they're also high interest because that acts as a natural conduit or funnel. If you're with people who like to do this thing that you like to do, then your chances of finding your people and finding someone you can click with are so much higher. It's a natural filter or conduit. So we enter the circle of participation by joining these activities. We participate, we have shared experiences, and then we nurture the friendship. That's like the general idea. Proximity is important. I want to just speak to it for a second before I get into some of the how do you do this. There's research that shows that even if every week you show up to the same online group, you will make friends because of proximity. Think about the workplace. A lot of times we make friends in the workplace because we're with people. And when we're with people, we are sort of thrown together and we're in proximity with them. So, proximity actually becomes a really important factor in this friendship journey because you have to show up. It creates a sort of predictability for people where they're like, oh, every Thursday night I see this person. And it allows you greater opportunity to meet people, have that bond, and be close. But I think it's important just to note that even in online situations, that proximity is really, really important. So, high interest activities. So, I've been working for literally years, and I have actually way more than just this on the slide of high interest activities that I've been cultivating to suggest to you. And these activities have high engagement opportunities to get to know people, and they offer another secret weapon. It's really hard to walk across a ballroom at some kind of mixer and go up to someone and ask them a question and make conversation. If you are in an activity where you have a role or a job or an excuse, for instance, if you are doing some kind of volunteer work and you have a reason to talk to the other members, online role play, gaming, activity, and you have an excuse, you're the dungeon master, you have to run things. If you are running some kind of, opportunity where you get to talk to people and you have a job and a role and an excuse, it is a lot easier to talk to people because it's sort of like it facilitates it, right? I'm not here just trying to make friends. I'm here as the person running this meeting or event, and therefore I have something to do. So, a lot of the activities that I promote have that role. Habitat for Humanity, huge. They also, some of them act as a natural filter. If you volunteer at certain places, you probably meet other people with like minded values. But I also want to stress that there are special interest clubs, adult ed classes. There are so many ways. Stand up comedy. I don't know that I'm brave enough to do it, but I have to tell you, people who I work with have been meeting and making friends that way. There are a lot of different activities that are high interest for our ADHD brain and that have this job or role and that then offer this conduit to make friends. And my suggestion is that you join a few of them. Many of the folks that I work with, the big disappointment they'll have is if they get months into it and realize it's not the right venue. Like I said about the chorus, there's only like this 7 minutes that you can really be with people. If you join multiple things, then you have multiple irons in the fire and you're less likely to feel like, oh, that was a waste of time. And you can always retrench on something. And so here's my question, like, are there activities you could investigate? They can be online. If you feel super socially anxious, online is a great way to start and get your feet wet and feel better and then try in person. If you want to try in person, how many activities do you feel like you could join? I wouldn't join 100, but I might join 3 or 4. And I would be looking for that high interest, high engagement. When you're in this activity, you're in a participationship, right? You're meeting people, you're being in proximity with them. Hopefully, you're getting to know them, and they're an activity friend. And you're building, hopefully, that conversation and sharing and getting to know someone. And then our goal is going to be to bridge to someone outside the activity. And I have a tip for this that works so well. I have a troubleshooting chapter in my next book, and I took this from the troubleshooting chapter just really quick tonight because I was like, I want to give this to them. One, you're having fun, you're comfortable being yourself, your conversations are growing deeper instead of like just surface chit chat. You're getting increased levels of vulnerability. You're learning about people. You know more about their life, their background, their history. You're planning time together outside the activity. And maybe you even develop inside jokes, inside baseball language, and they come to understand your sense of humor. Now, how do you move from someone who's just an activity friend to someone outside that becomes more of an emerging friend and someone you see in multiple locations? Okay, this is where you're ready with a next step. A next step can be something you offer someone to do that is related to the activity, right? So, like if you were in some kind of music group, you could say, like, hey, I want to go hear this band, or do you want to go to see this person? If you're in a cooking class, you could ask them to go to the farmer's market. People always say to me, give me next steps other than coffee. So I'm trying to make sure I use examples other than coffee. But the idea here is that you use your knowledge from your chats, what you know about them, to offer something kind of low stakes that you guys could do together. The best next steps, in my humble opinion, are something that relate to their interests. Hey, did you see so and so is going to be here? They're in concert. We both like this musician. I don't advocate things that are big leaps. So one of my clients tried to do like, we meet at yoga class. Now let's go on a yoga retreat together. And that is a very, very big next step. I'm talking about something that is small. And if you think back to your dating days, something that isn't such a big leap, you're not getting married, you're going for a cup of coffee and on a next date. And I have some scripts, and I'm happy to give all these slides to Shane that he can share them with you to use for these next steps. I love scripts. I think when you're anxious, which I totally am, and you feel like sort of at sea, it's great to have like scripted out a little bit what you want to say. You might not even say it, but just knowing is like, I don't know, it makes you feel better. So all this is you trying to sort of bridge, and having spent a bunch of time with someone, you're looking to bridge outside. I'd love to hang out more. And one of the things I'd say is I'd try twice and then let it go. So people always ask me, how much should I try? What should I, what is rejection? What is not? I don't take any of this as rejection, because when you're trying to make friends, sometimes people have to be in a place where they are also open to adding to their friendship groups or adding to their number of friends. We, as people with ADHD, because of rejection sensitivity, we tend to take someone not biting as a rejection. I don't take that as a rejection because we don't know what's going on in someone's life. Right now, I'm finishing the book. I have a daughter who's a junior in high school. I have a son who's in the fourth grade. I'm crazy busy. If someone asks me a next step, I might not even notice, or I might genuinely not be able to make time. And so I think we have to remember that. And if you're asking someone and offering them next steps, I would try twice. And then if it doesn't work, let it go. And that's why we have multiple irons in the fire. You can ask them to have fun. You can tell them something you've thought about. You can ask them to meet up. And that's why I say meet lots of people and have lots of irons in the fire, so that no one encounter and no one conversation is the end all be all. I think for anxious people, many times we build up this one conversation, this one person, and it puts so much pressure on us. If you have multiple irons in the fire, then if something falls apart, it's not a big deal. It might be disappointing, but it's not as big a deal. How long does this take? Okay. There's different data out there on how long it takes to make friends. I happen to think that it's important to think about this as you need to spend several hours a week together to solidify a friendship, and that casual, frequent interactions are great, but then it takes longer to build a friendship. Some people say 11 meetings, each lasting like 3 hours for a period of 6 months. Even these data points, I just want to highlight, they're sketch. The studies are not like random double blind studies. I actually talked to a woman at Princeton who has done a bunch of research on this, and she admitted that the studies are not as efficacious as we would like. So here's what I've chosen to say. If it takes 11 meetings to make a friend, then to me, after 2 or 3 meetings, I would be thinking about, am I getting to know someone? Do I know more about them? Am I sharing more? And am I ready to start thinking about a next step? If every time you enter the activity, they're waving you over, if there are signs and overtures that they are interested in you, then I would think about a next step. If they are not as reciprocating, then maybe have a couple more meetings, try to get to know them. I think another thing that we often do is we also try to sort of put a square peg in a round hole. And what I really want us to think about is this person compatible with you? Are they your people? Do you enjoy them? Does the conversation get easier with each talk? That might be something that is harder for you and it takes more time. But I think, we can't just make everyone into a friend. There has to be a click, there has to be compatibility. And if you're struggling in this journey, I would ask yourself, like, is this person my people? And do they kind of meet the criteria for someone I click with? Because that might be the hang up. All right, signs someone's interested in being your friends. It's one is that they're interested in your life, right? You come in, you go to, build your Habitat for Humanity houses, and they say, "Hey, how did that go?" Right? What was that vacation like? What happened with your boss, right? There's mutual sharing in conversations is usually another really good signs, right? It's not just you sharing and you talking, it's them as well. Sign someone wants to be your friend, right? You both initiate conversation. They are interested and excited. They say things like, "I thought about you the other day." They linger is a really big sign. They linger and talk longer after class or after the activity is ended. You lean against your car and you end up having a really good talk. You feel like you would be comfortable hanging out with them in a different setting and you get to know them more and you can talk about their life and their background a little bit. They give you their full attention and they encourage you to be one-on-one. They encourage you to sit down. They encourage you to tell your story. One of the things that we struggle with in terms of building these bonds is making conversation. But I wanted to share a skill with you that can help in this journey and can make conversation less boring, which I know is the Achilles heel for us. And that is conversational threading. So, about a year ago, I became obsessed with conversations and how do I make conversations easier for people with ADHD. And I stumbled upon this TikTok creator. He has a big website, he has a big presence, and he described this skill called conversational threading. And I have been using this, presenting it ever since, and it is gold. The idea here is that you present multiple threads for people to latch onto. This isn't monologuing and it isn't telling like a long story. What it is that instead of just saying, when you're answering conversation questions, when you're using conversation starters, maybe when you're making more small talk, instead of, where are you from? Just saying, "Oh, I'm from Boston," right? You would say, like, "I'm from Cape Cod. I know it's known for summer, but it's really different in the winter. I found that although I love it there in the summer, I love the action of the city," right? Now someone has multiple threads to sort of pull on and latch onto. You've also sort of peppered the conversation with some interesting things that they could talk about or not. And if they don't choose to be interested, right? So, for instance, if I was talking to someone, even in a superficial conversation, I might mention that I love true crime. And if they are not going to pick up the thread and pull it, then that tells me something, right? Like, okay, maybe you're not my people because there's a huge case going on in Boston right now. And anyone who I would want to be friends with who's remotely interested in true crime is like stopping me to talk about this case. So if I mention it and you don't pick up that thread, that tells me something. You're not my people, right? Because this is something I have to talk about this 24 hours a day. So I think that it's just an easy way to kind of expand on things. I think it gives us a little bit of a more robust way to talk about stuff in a way that we can do without sort of just having to live in conversation being super superficial. One of the things I would say is that as we are building these friendships, one of the things we as ADD people tend to do is to give trust away. We rush into friendship very quickly. We give trust away. We share a lot about our lives. And I would say that trust is earned and people's patterns predict their future behavior. So as you are making a choice and going through this process, I want you to actually like be thinking about whether this person is worthy of you, right? What do they do with information? How do they act? Are they somebody who is worthy of you? You're awesome. Are they? So how do you know if someone is actually trustworthy? And we're going to talk about sharing and trust in a second. But I would say I can't be friends with someone who doesn't find my neurodivergent traits endearing and who like shames and blames. They show consistency. Trust is track record. They show you over time how they are and how they show up. And in terms of sharing, I have this new method I call the ice cream scoop method, which is that when you think of trust, think of giving one scoop of ice cream. So you're sharing one thing and then you're seeing how they handle it, what they do with it. Then the next conversation, you're adding another scoop, right? So you might be chatting with someone while you build houses in Habitat for Humanity, and you may say something about being divorced a few years ago. And that's your one scoop. See what they do with it, see if they pick up on it. And then the next time you give them two scoops and you add a scoop at a time instead of telling them everything, including your social security number, your credit history, the history of trauma in your family. But as you're building these relationships and creating these emerging friendships, we do have to share more vulnerably and we do have to get to know someone. And it is a dilemma for us since we do tend to overshare. So I came up with this scoops method to try to give us some kind of visual about how much I share and that I'm adding to it each time. I told Shane that I would let you know when I'm starting to wrap up. I have this whole handout on making small talk. I know small talk isn't our favorite thing, but when we think about making friends and sort of following this formula, it is really important to have the ability to make these kinds of conversations. And for many of us, I know I was never really taught, and I've always struggled with it because I always found it really boring. I try to offer a lot of solutions on how to not make it boring, but I wanted to share this handout with all of you. I just started a new podcast as part of my YouTube channel, and this is a bit link to an episode that I did with Brendan. We had a really great talk about friendship and people pleasing. And so if you want to check out the podcast, I have really great guests that I've recorded through the summer, not all just your usual suspects. I've brought in people from all kinds of different worlds and had some great information with them.
Yeah, you did great. I was messaging the men's group Discord, and I'm like, this is amazing. So we got a few questions that were kind of sent to us through here. We're going to send out all the links, and everything that she just mentioned will be in the notes when we send out the recording and everything to everyone. So, you know, we're going to really try to get all that set up. And also, I think Joshua just shared the podcast episode in the chat. So y'all go check that out.
Thank you.
So Ironically enough, I discovered a rule when I was a lot younger. When I got into project management, everything was about everything in like the project management classes that I was taking was always these rules, right? The certain percentages and things like that. And I got into this habit of 10-5-3-1. I walk into a room, right? And there's 10 people in a room. Five people are going to be probably people I can talk to, right? Probably going to be people I can talk to, like have some sort of connection with. Three people are going to be people I probably connect with pretty well. One person is going to be somebody I really probably am going to connect extremely well, right? They're the Dungeons and Dragons nerd that's over in the corner who's just chilling and relaxing and playing on a video game. I'm going to go sit next to him and play on my video game and kind of like share space together. I always felt like the 10-5-3-1 rule was really relevant for me whenever I was trying to make friends. And so whenever you were talking about that earlier and all the different studies, I was kind of looking at the different numbers and I was like, actually, that's kind of going in line with my own thought process here. So, but I said all that though, we really have to kind of quantify a lot of these things and learn a lot of these things that a lot of people learn naturally through social programming as they get older. But of course, when it's ADHD and autism, other types of neurodivergence, we just don't have that self-reflection and social awareness to make these connections. And there was that one part where you were actually giving, hey, here's how you know it's actually working. Here's the things to look for. Because you kind of talked about it. Sometimes we apply really close friendship to people who are on that lower step. I can't remember which one it was that you said. It was the short-term
Acquaintances. Yeah.
acquaintances and the ones that's like barely known.
Buddy,
But yeah, they're
buddy.
buddy. There we go. So I've definitely made that mistake. Definitely made that mistake. So
I think a
uh
lot of people have, though. I mean, when I say that to people, it's a realization I had about 2 years ago. People really resonate with it, where I'm like, listen, you're upset with this person because they didn't, they weren't there for you when your mother was dying, but they weren't your friend. And so you were asking of them something that they weren't prepared to give, or, just even talking to them all the time about stuff, and maybe they weren't as receptive. I think a lot of times we are mistaking someone who's an acquaintance for a friend.
yeah, it's definitely been a problem that I've seen, especially in the group, understanding the boundaries,
Yes.
right? Like sometimes it seems to go from 0 to 100 when I'm like I reach out to him from the men's group. I'm like, hey man, just checking in on you. How are you doing? And like it's a couple sentences, and then all of a sudden I'm getting that life story, and I'm here for it because you're struggling. I recognize that, but some of the things that some people have told me in the past has just been like, that's actually a hair bit way over TMI. And it's just like, okay, we got to pull that stuff back. And I think that kind of segues into a question that I have.
For sure.
I've gone so long masking that I don't really know who I am. I used to be able to fit in with a lot of people, and now I struggle a lot. I don't really feel like anyone would be interested in being friends with me because I don't really do a lot anymore. And I overshare too much when I do make friends.
So I think that one of the things we're going to have to do as a people is figure out what to do if we've been masking. A lot of late diagnosed people are saying, like, I've masked my whole life. One of the best ways to unmask is to look at your values and do values exercises and strengths exercises and to figure out who you really are. Because part of masking for some people can be that they play a role. For other people, they can become kind of a chameleon where they're doing everything everybody wants. And it's like, do you like burgers or hot dogs? And you end up being like, I don't really know. But I think that it's something that can be changed, especially by exploring your values, your likes, your dislikes, your strengths, and also catching yourself in a more people pleasing response of like, do you want to go kayaking? What do you want to do? And also having dates with yourself and exploring what is it that I really enjoy doing. I definitely think that oversharing is a thing, but I don't want to take such a negative tone as to say no one would want to be friends with us because of oversharing. I think they do. I also think that there's a ton of research, just like an explosion of research in the autistic community over the past few years, that shows that the more you explain your perspective, your neurodivergence, who you are, and this can be using a label or not. So you could be like, I'm an anxious person. I need to know where we're going when when we go out. You could be like, I'm the kind of person who sometimes overshares and I'm working on it. And you don't even have to say I'm ADHD, I'm autistic. You don't have to say any of that. But I think that people don't always understand. And the research is really showing that if you explain to people that one of the biggest problems we have with typical people is mismatched communication, that their expectation of us is very different, and then they don't really get what we're doing. But if we explain, if we say, like, this is who I am, this is what I do, the research shows people are like, okay. And that is my personal experience. When my clients explain to someone, this is how I function, this is how I am, I'm working on this, whatever it is, people are actually very gracious. It's just really a matter of them becoming more understanding of us. Because what happens is if we don't explain, they fill in the story, and they often fill in sort of a cynical story or a story that's not true. So I think it's just something to think about, that whether we use a diagnostic label or not, I call it a communisplation, where we communicate our needs, who we are, how we are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's definitely, I think a lot of people sit here and get frustrated with autistic people, and this is something I've dealt with in my life because I want you to understand how to get from point A to point B, right? Unfortunately, there's, 7A, 3B, and 2A that you need to follow along with me to get to this place. I got to a point where I wanted to be authentic, and I actually did what you're talking about, where when I introduce myself to people and when I'm talking to people, I go ahead and throw out there, I don't necessarily like, hey, I have ADHD and autistic and, whatever, but no, but like, hey, I'm ADHD, I have autism, so I'm probably not going to look you in the eye. My hands may do this weird thing, especially when I get really socially awkward, where it starts going over my right shoulder. That's just me doing a thing that I don't control. It just does. And I overshare a lot, so if I'm telling a story and it's a little bit too much, go ahead and let me know. Totally giving you permission to let interrupt me or anything like that, because I can talk a lot. And you know, that's kind of like my disclaimer every time I get into a conversation with like a group of people. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people are super graceful about it, and they are gracious about it, and they like, yeah, no problem. Or a couple people sit here and say, "Oh, autism," or ADHD, and it's part of that story that we've kind of also heard in whenever people were like wanting to explain and understand pronouns and gender identity and LGBTQ stuff. It's like when we start to actually explain to people and people actually get used to hearing and understanding more of this, we take away the uncertainty of the situation. When we have the certainty, then we also start finding our way through things. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it really can help. I really do. And I know that I can feel the cynicism of some people. I totally get it. That's why I say you don't have to use a diagnostic label. Like if you're in the workplace and you feel unsafe about that, don't. But I do feel like we also have to let ourselves off the hook a little bit. This isn't going to be 100%. If you
hmm.
overshare like literally all the time and you start working on oversharing, you're going to overshare less, and you're going to have days where you overshare a ton. The other day I was interrupting, and I do not know why I was interrupting so much. I've been working on interrupting since I was like 10 years old. I've gotten better about it. And then I realized I had an ear infection. So I think part of the reason I was interrupting was like I was literally unable to hear. But I don't know. And the thing is, it was a bad day. And then tomorrow I get up and I try again. I can't hold myself accountable to that one bad day. And I think helping with that ruminative cycle is a huge piece of this, because if it was Caroline 20 years ago, I would have focused on that bad day for weeks. But because I've worked on rumination and stuff, I didn't. I was just like, well, it wasn't great. You know, we move on.
Let's just, it's a new day.
It's a new day.
Brayden, you have your hand up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I
Okay,
can.
that was so weird. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to use an example here. A few weeks ago, I went on a field trip with my son's class, and there were a bunch of parents there, and there was a few situations where, you know, our kids would go off, they went off on this train thing or whatever. So it was just a bunch of us parents standing around, and everybody's kind of mingling and everything. But I have this thing where, like, I want to get to know these people and start building some relationships and everything. And knowing that we're all parents of kids in the same class, that was like perfect opportunity. But then I find that I am having conversations in my own head with these people, but never actually starting them. And so it's like I'm standing there like, like, oh yeah, I'm like, coming up with this whole like dialogue in my head of talking to them about their kids and about my kid and whatnot. And then I find by the time like I actually am ready to actually go up and talk to them, the moment's already passed, the kids are back, and we're kind of all over the place and lost opportunity. Do you
Okay.
have any advice for getting past that?
Yes, I do. We met at the ADHD conference, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So you came up to me and you talked to me for the past 2 years with no problem whatsoever, and we've chatted extensively, correct?
Yep.
What made the parent thing hard?
I think it's because I automatically felt a connection because
Okay.
we had the shared experience of the ADHD and all of that. And I mean, we're all at the same conference and everything. So I guess that would be it. So I think I know where you're going with this, but
No, you don't necessarily.
okay.
No, but I think like so literally all the time, and of course I don't want this. I want people to come talk to me, but all the time people will say like, "Oh, I meant to talk to you for the past 3 years and I never did." Whereas you came right up to me, we've chatted and we've chatted several times. And so I totally remembered you. I remembered you from your name, right? And which is like a little working memory miracle. But like, I think that you felt a lot of pressure with these parents. Like, I think you created that dialogue partly because I'm guessing you felt like a lot of pressure to sort of like use this opportunity.
Yeah, I see that.
And you didn't feel that like sort of bomb of like, oh, we have ADD together, everybody talks, like all that stuff that you felt. This is why I want us to have multiple irons in the fire because, and I'm going to tell you how to overcome in a second, but like, I think, and that's what happens to us a lot. And that's why I want people to join multiple activities, to have multiple opportunities, to have multiple people that they're cultivating, because I don't want you to feel like this is my one chance. Because I've been there and I've been there even as a parent, and that is so much pressure, like crazy amounts of pressure. And then how to overcome is I would just have 3 conversation starters. You can ask them about their kid. You can ask them about what they've been up to, what they're doing on the weekend. If there's like a local thing going on, you can ask them about that. But I would just ask a question and I would keep it super low stakes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would also look for other opportunities. Like if you're looking to make friends through parenting, I would volunteer in the schools and look for other opportunities that give you more of an excuse or a job, right? So like I'll just give a personal example. My husband used to run, now I wouldn't want to do this because it like seems terrible to me, but he used to run this like whole Halloween fest with a few other people, and he was just a worker, but it gave him like an entire day of being with people to set up this horrendous Halloween thing and meeting guys and talking to them. And it was lower stakes because you had a job, like you were pulling out the bale of hay and you were doing different things. So there's a lot of opportunities like that through schools. And I feel like then you would also be more yourself. And I know yourself to be someone who is easy to talk to.
Yeah, and I think that you say that, and a few things kind of pop into my head where there's opportunities to volunteer and whatnot. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else? Questions?
All right. Well, I actually have a few other questions from the group since nobody's really asking any. Just have to find my notes. My battery almost died, so my computer was giving me a heads up. All right, let's see. Where's this questions at? Oh,
I see Jason has a question in the chat.
Yes. Can you hear me?
yep.
Okay. I'm just really curious to know why do we overshare? What is the science behind our brains wanting to do that?
Oversharing comes back to a few things. One is self-regulation, right? So we lack self-regulation, so we impulsively overshare. But I would argue that that's not the main one. The main one is actually forgetting about our level of closeness and intimacy with the people we're talking to, and sort of that perspective taking piece where we think about, who am I talking to and what are the boundaries around sharing and how much do I share? So I think it's like the perfect storm. I start to overshare because I forget that boundary. And then my self reg doesn't kick in to sort of curb that or pull that back. And I just keep going. I think it also goes back to, again, another self reg thing, monologuing, where we kind of get into a monologue about it. And I saw someone mention trauma dumping in the chat. And I want to just say, I believe that some of our oversharing is actually trauma dumping. And I do not say this in a pejorative way. I've had a ton of trauma therapy. Nobody who writes a book called Why Will No One Play With Me and has people bully her extensively for her entire childhood wouldn't need trauma therapy. And I definitely sometimes recognize oversharing when I hear it. It's more trauma dumping. So I think that's another piece of this that we kind of don't talk about enough, where people are not meaning to, but it's almost like they're looking for an ear. They're looking for someone to talk to, and it ends up being random strangers. That's what I think.
Got it.
No problem.
Yeah, that's actually, if you ever want to know what the actual brain is doing there, I spent a number of years studying it just to figure out that exact question. I got another question for you, unless anybody else has anything. All right. It says, I'm friendly and I show it, but it never turns into real friendship. People don't invite me to things or reach out. What am I doing wrong?
Okay, so I think that this happens a lot to folks, and you're not alone with this. I think one of the things we have to sort of diagnose and troubleshoot is, do you get past superficial conversation into more sharing? Or is it that you are sharing very heavy stuff, which does tend to scare people away? Even neurodivergent people. I think one of the myths we need to counter is that if you're just friends with neurodivergent people, all this stuff goes away. I hear every day from neurodivergent people complaining about other neurodivergent people. I don't think it goes away. I think it's more buffered, but I think that might be a case in some cases where people share really heavy stuff. Do you have a real bond? Are these your people? Because if you don't have a real bond, if you don't have that shared experience I was talking about in my presentation, if you don't have that shared interest, then you're sort of stuck in the superficial zone, and then it doesn't move past the superficial because they don't have anything to sort of dig in with, right? They don't have a real bond with you. And so if that's the case, if you diagnose a little bit and you're like, that's the case, then I would head toward those high interest activities, because we're trying to find our people. We're trying to find the people who we click with who we engage with and who we have something to talk about with, which makes it much easier to bond and build that friendship.
I think the other thing is, are you putting yourself out there? Like sometimes we have to be the one that instigates, kind of like what you were talking about in the thing. Do you have something that is your next steps? Right?
Right.
Are you willing to take that next step and say, I had a really good time talking to you. Can we connect later on? I have this other thing that I do that's kind of tangentially related to what we're doing now.
Having something you kind of do with other people and offer to other people and to be a helper without tipping into people pleasing, right? Can be another really good way to bridge these gaps, right? So if you're someone, I'm just going to give an example. I know a man who is very introverted, had a hard time making friends, and his job involved video stuff. He was really good at it. And he started doing that stuff as a volunteer in like the town, in the church, in different things. So on the one hand, you have to set boundaries. You don't want people to use you. On the other hand, he ended up having that job, that excuse, that role, right? And then ended up being with people, thrown together, doing this stuff, and then made a lot of friends through this volunteerism. So that's another sort of hack is to make sure you're in the right place, right time, and have sort of serendipitous meetups, or make sure that you're going enough, right? Not showing up once a month, showing up every time. And then, like, what do you have that you could use to build that sort of job role piece? And so that you are offering of yourself and you have that proximity to meet people. And listen, I wish this was super simple and easy and I could tell you like it's these 3 steps and if you do them, that's it. But I think the other piece is, you know, are these really your people? Like that's the biggest thing, right? Or are you just in sort of the superficial zone and there's really nothing there?
I think you've said that a couple of times, and I think we need to really reiterate it a little bit. We need to find our people. And if we're not enjoying the place that we're at, the people who would be our people probably won't enjoy that either. And so we kind of have to really make sure that what we are doing is something that we actually enjoy doing and not trying to just do the thing that's the fad. Perfect example. Buddy of mine wants me to come play pickleball with him. I don't want to play pickleball. That's not a thing I want to do. And when I go to those events, I really don't connect with anybody there. So I definitely understand that.
Right. And like pickleball's the perfect example, Shane. I am a non-athlete. I was last picked. I know pickleball's all the craze. I do know people who've made friends through pickleball, but I'm not going to make friends through pickleball because I'm not interested in being outside or sweating or playing pickleball. So if I made friends, right? Like I had a girlfriend who was in like a volleyball thing and she kept being like, come with me, come with me. But if I made friends that way, they wouldn't be real friends because I would be sort of trudging along in misery, right? It wouldn't be my people. It would be me masking actually and pretending to be a pickleball person.
I cannot tell you how many times I fell into the dating trap of like, hey, I want to, would you be willing to go on this 5 mile hike with me? No, that's not a thing. But it's in your dating profile that you liked hiking. I'm like, there's hiking and then there's death marches.
Well, here's the thing I would say, because I know Brendan Mahan would be like, oh, but we all have to adapt. We do all have to adapt. But if we want to, we could say, hey, I'll go hiking with you because you went to such and such with me and I want to be a good friend. But I'm not necessarily going to tell you I love hiking. So you can explain to people like, hey, I'll go with you, but it isn't my thing. And that way we're not falling into masking. Because I see a lot of people in the chat writing things about masking. And also that once they got into therapy, got a diagnosis, they were unmasking. And that also helped their quality of friendships.
Yeah, I think that was, we talked about that before. Like, that's kind of how I fell into just deciding to be who I was. And this was before ADHD and autism was even in the picture. It's just like, that's when I started really making better connections with people. And this was even after a really like horrifying divorce. And when everything was up in the air, I was still able to actually connect with people because they liked me. Oh, somebody asked, what is masking?
Oh, sure.
What is masking?
Okay, so masking is something that has emerged as something that happens for many neurodivergent people in the past few years. It's always existed, but we've really become aware. And it's this idea of pretending. So you wear a mask or a facade, and instead of you stimming and being hyper and fidgeting around, you would pretend not to have those neurodivergent traits. You would likely pretend to have likes and dislikes that you don't have in order to get along with the group. My classic example of masking is that it is exactly the pickleball thing. You like tell people always what they want to hear, and you never really express your needs. Whereas being authentic is about, what are your true values, your true sense of humor, your true personality, and that you can adapt to a group. You can adapt and you can be kind, and you don't always have to say the first thing that's on your mind. But your values and those core authentic aspects of yourself will stay the same.
Also, just shared a blog in the chat that goes to the men's group, and we have a couple of really good articles on masking. I'll give y'all an example of kind of how my autistic side of my brain really did it. Like, I started understanding when I was 11, 10, 11, 12, that I didn't get people, right? There was always the jokes that flew over my head. There was the awkwardness. There was the, like, am I being laughed with or laughed at? This is when I actually started getting an understanding of that. I started getting there's things I'm missing. And I actually was watching Oprah, and one of the things that came up was this guy who was an FBI body language analyst. And like, he talked about how you could see micro expressions, and that's how I actually learned how to mask to fit in. Because when I wanted to smile, then I needed to make sure my smile reached my eyes. And like, all these little things, all these like micro things that, for the longest time, I would actually look in the mirror and make sure that the smile would reach my eyes when I'm interested in something. And it was because I didn't know what these things were. Like, first off, there was rural, and I had to like find a logical methodology to understand people. And for the longest time, that's how I melded in, was because I just became whatever needed to be there.
Yeah.
And the people needed me to enjoy a lot of stuff that I didn't enjoy, and I would go along with the crowd. And we just kind of fall into these traps and we lose ourselves. And I think that's the biggest danger that a lot of us as men, as we get older, we just don't know who we are. And this goes to what you were talking about. We have to go back and find our values and understand our strengths and do a lot of work and really have to understand that.
And I love that definition, becoming whatever's needed, right? And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. And there's an irony. You try to fit in by becoming whatever anyone is needed, but that actually robs you of real connection and real friendship, because there's sort of a ring of inauthenticity. People can detect your inauthenticity, and even though you have these great intentions and you're doing this at personal distress and well-being, they tend to be a little bit pushed away by that. And then because you're not really being your authentic self, you kind of don't ever get to have that click with someone, because they're not getting to know the real you or getting to sort of know your real interests. You are sort of never giving them that part of you. I get why people do it. This isn't me judging, it's just me explaining.
Yeah. There's also the mental energy that we waste. Like, to the point that it becomes exhausting to be around that person. Like, because I
Yes.
constantly have to maintain this facade around you. If I've put myself in a situation where I've kind of trapped myself into doing a lot of these things that I don't really enjoy, I'm going to start resenting that person.
Yes.
And it kind of allows me to cast the blame off of my masking onto that person. I have to be this thing to make that person like me. And
Yes.
we find ourselves often in a lot of romantic relationships where that's the situation.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And I think it starts like in childhood also when people complain about us a lot and tell us to not be ourselves, which I hope is not going to be happening going forward. But that, those of us who are north of 40, that was definitely the case.
oh yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like, I loved reading, right? But my dad was just so anti-reading that for a good year, I stopped reading and I wouldn't read. And I just like spiraled into this just pit of depression. So, yeah. So, any other questions from the group? Right. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And that being said, it was a joy to have you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me. This was fun.
yeah. Yep.
What if someone you work with, you're deducting that they could be on the spectrum, but they don't realize it and it's having a negative impact on their professional life, their all their relationships, and they don't see it? How could I be a better friend?
Okay, so this is a tricky one. I have a personal policy like where I don't go around telling people that they have ADHD, but I often am in a situation where I'm like, the elephant in the room is that you have ADHD and this is like the thing that's going on, right? So I totally relate. What I would say is that you could start to talk about autistic traits and information about autism and share some things and see if they kind of bite or recognize like, oh, I'm like that. And I also think if there's ever a sort of open door in a more intimate conversation where you could not say, like, oh, you're autistic, but just be like, I didn't know about my ADHD. You can take it from like your perspective and say, like, I didn't know for a long time. I have these like super neurodivergent traits, maybe eventually get them to come to a place like this with you. It is super hard. And believe me, I have watched as certain people denied that their kids had ADHD for like years around me. And I always just tried to be sort of like a sounding board and to sort of mention stuff without directly. And this is just my personal policy. I don't turn to someone and directly and be like, this is your problem. This is what's going on, because I feel like it's just too abrasive. And if they're not ready to see it, it's really not my place. But I think just by peppering it in a little bit, you could maybe help them because they probably don't know anything about autism.
Well, this particular person, they have a guidance counselor degree. And like everywhere, it's kind of like Mary had a little lamb. Everywhere she goes, the diagnosis or the symptoms are sure to go. Like
Yeah.
she will be the one in the meeting, and I get it because I've accepted, and everybody knows that's why I stand in the back of the classroom or whatever the case may be. But what would be challenging with this particular person is because they have I don't know if they go to therapy or not, they could flip it and then turn into the victim of I don't know. I'm trying.
Well,
Yeah. I have found that me being out and about ADHD and autism, and those naturally coming up in conversations when I'm talking with people because it's my hyperfixation. Whenever the conversation comes up, and if somebody has a question, I make sure to pepper in things about autism and ADHD and other neurodivergences within the conversation,
Right.
especially because I have ADHD and autism. So I get to talk about both of them. But you can really talk about the experiences that you have heard about or know about and see if that conversation kind of goes in there. Use examples from the men's group, of things, but also give solutions that would actually work without really needing to talk about autism and ADHD.
It's a hard thing, though. I want to say, it's a
Yeah.
hard thing. And I have many people I know who I have even said to them, have you ever thought about autism? And I will tell you, I do not know if it's just their lack of knowledge about autism, even though now this person has a counseling degree. I find that there are people who are very in deep denial about it, and they don't see it, and they don't really want to see it. It's very hard.
Are they more prone to be closer to animals than people?
There are some autistic folks who don't well, here's the biggest trait. It's low self-awareness, right? So if you have low self-awareness, then you are less likely to see your traits mirrored in someone, right? That's where they probably aren't having the introspection, especially if they're untreated, undiagnosed, right? And especially if they're not seeking it, right? I think most of us on this Zoom probably knew something was up with ourselves. And even if we didn't find the right, solution at first, with every Franklin Covey course I took, I was trying to figure out what's up, right? Why is there this gap between my intellect and my performance? Some people aren't doing that because of self-awareness, and they're not seeking those answers.
I appreciate it. I just wanted to ask that because it was on friendship, and I call it the spidey sense, to where, like spidey,
Yeah.
where you make those connections. And not that it's my responsibility or my ability to respond for her, just concerned that she's oblivious to the negativity that she brings. So everybody's, oh no, I'm on her team, or oh no, here comes Debbie Downer. Because she does give off that vibe if you give into it. But what has helped me be more friendly is considering, I think she's really has, because she doesn't read the room. Like if she starts talking, it's super, super negative. It's like if you've seen Inside Out, but on steroids, the one that was sadness, her sadness is like the vortex. And so like everybody's like, I don't want to, like one teacher left. I'm a teacher. So that makes it even more, well, not comparing jobs, but it makes it rather interesting when someone doesn't recognize, hey, I'm giving these off. So I'm trying to be like, well, maybe this is why, she does that. Because that's helped me be more understanding and more patient when she takes over the conversation or tries to speak for the principal.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that just as a person who has been depressed in my life, I feel like a lot of times what I hear from people is also just such signs of depression, and that the depression is coloring everything they do. And it's really hard because sometimes it's not your place to say get help, but it is affecting all their relationships. And you see it so clearly. So I definitely understand. And I'm surprised the kids haven't told her that she's a Debbie Downer, because kids are brutal and they're often very honest.
Thank you. And I
Agreed.
hope I wasn't trying to take over. I just thought about it and I was like, well, let me pick her brain because you're the expert on friendships, and also from a woman's perspective, because we think differently. Friendships form differently. So that's what and especially since I'm working on being optimistic, because that's one of the things that successful people do. Find, what can I learn from this? So even if I'm the only one that's team go, unnamed teacher, like, we're going to be patient with her.
Well, that's a very great attitude to have. And I think that that kind of growth mindset will pay off, because being in a growth mindset is partly about being in the learning zone. And I also, by the way, that's how my attitude is. Sometimes when there are people who are, negative in my life, I do try to learn from it and even just say, look, this is why I continue to get help for all of my, various mental health stuff, so that I don't become this person who isn't able to see the positive. So, like, yeah, I want to skip my meeting with my therapist, but let me not, because this is the result. You have to continue to get help.
So I want to say again, thank you, Carolyn. This has been amazing. I've actually gotten a number of messages from different people who are really excited about this. So this has been awesome. Again, for everyone else out there, thank you so much for coming. These videos will be out as soon as possible, so look for them on the next couple of days. So again, thank you all. Y'all have a great night.
Bye bye.